The auction block smelled of dust and shame. Hannah Cole stood there in the brutal New Mexico sun, hands trembling, while men she'd known her whole life, men who'd tipped their hats to her father, now appraised her like livestock. The auctioneer's voice cut through the heat. $30 for the debt. Who will take the woman with it? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, "Too much woman for $30? Another voice, crueler. Too much woman. Period. Hannah's face burned, but she kept her chin up. She'd been called worse. Being thick-waisted and broad-shouldered in a world that prized delicate waists and fragile wrists had taught her to swallow humiliation like medicine. But this, being sold in the town square of Dusty Hollow like a breeding mare, this was a new depth. Then a voice cut through the mockery. Deep. Quiet. Absolute. I'll take the debt. A man stepped forward from the shadows of the general store. Tall, weathered, maybe 55, with eyes the color of winter sky. Elias Vance, the rancher who lived alone on the edge of nowhere, the man who hadn't spoken to anyone since his wife died. He dropped $30 silver on the auctioneer's table. The debt's mine. The woman answers to no one. What drives a man to buy a stranger's freedom? And what price will both of them pay for it? Stay with me, because what happens next in the desert between them will test everything they thought they knew about honor, desire, and the cost of redemption. The ride to Elias Vance's ranch took 2 hours through red dust and scrub brush, the Sandia Mountains rising like broken teeth on the horizon. He rode ahead on a bay gelding. She followed on a mule, gripping the saddle with thighs that ached from years of walking, not riding. He didn't speak, not once. When they finally reached his land, a modest spread with a timber cabin and corrals that had seen better days, he dismounted, tied his horse, and turned to her. "You'll sleep in the back room," he said. "Do the cooking if you know how. Mend what needs mending. But you're not a servant. You're free to leave whenever you want." Hannah stared at him. "Then why'd you buy my debt?" His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I know what it's like to watch someone get destroyed by this world, and I got tired of watching." He walked into the house and left her standing there, dust settling around her boots. That first week she learned the rhythm of his silence. Elias woke before dawn, worked the cattle and fences until his shirt was soaked through, came back at dusk to eat whatever she'd cooked, then sat outside with a bottle of whiskey and a silver locket he never opened in front of her. Hannah kept to herself, moving through the cabin like a ghost. She cooked beans and cornbread, mended his torn shirts, swept the floors. She tried not to notice the way his shoulders filled a doorway, or the way his hands, scarred and strong, handled a rifle like it was an extension of his body. But she noticed. And late at night, when she lay in the narrow bed in the back room, she wondered what kind of man bought a woman's freedom and then asked for nothing in return. The answer came 2 weeks in when she found his account books. He'd left them on the kitchen table, open to a page of numbers that didn't add up. Hannah had learned arithmetic from her father, one of the few gifts he'd given her before drinking himself into an early grave. She ran her finger down the columns, frowning. The prices he was paying for feed and supplies were nearly double what they should be. Someone in town was robbing him blind. She grabbed a pencil and started making notes. By the time Elias came in from the evening chores, she'd filled 2 pages with calculations. He stopped in the doorway, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" "The merchants in town are cheating you," she said, not looking up. "Been doing it for months, looks like. Maybe years." Silence. Then he crossed to the table, standing so close she could smell sweat and leather and something darker A whiskey, maybe, or just exhaustion. You can read, he said quietly. My father taught me before the drinking got bad. She met his eyes. You're losing money, Mr. Vance. A lot of it. If you keep paying these prices, you'll lose the ranch in a year. Something shifted in his face. Not gratitude, something more complicated. Why tell me? He asked. Because you didn't have to buy my debt, she said. But you did. So I figure I owe you the truth. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once and walked outside. But the next morning, there was a new ledger on the table with her name written inside the cover. And beneath it, in his rough hand, for the only honest bookkeeper in New Mexico. It started with small things. The way Elias began asking her opinion on which cattle to sell, which fences needed mending first. The way he'd linger an extra moment when she handed him his coffee, their fingers brushing. The way Hannah caught herself studying the line of his jaw when he didn't know she was looking. They were careful, both of them, like dancers circling each other, neither willing to make the first move. But the desire was there, coiling between them like smoke. One night, 3 weeks after she'd arrived, Elias came in late with blood on his shirt. He'd been kicked by a horse, nothing serious, but the cut on his ribs needed cleaning. Sit, Hannah said, pointing to the kitchen chair. He hesitated, then obeyed. She heated water, tore cloth for bandages, tried to ignore the way her hands shook as she unbuttoned his shirt. His chest was a map of scars, old knife wounds, a bullet grazed near his collarbone, the kind of damage a man collected when he'd lived hard and survived harder. You were a bounty hunter, she said quietly, cleaning the cut with careful strokes. Long time ago. What made you stop? His hand moved to his pocket, where he kept the silver locket. Lost something that mattered more than money. Hannah's throat tightened. She knew about loss, but she didn't press. She finished bandaging him in silence, trying not to notice how warm his skin was beneath her fingers, how her pulse hammered in her wrists. When she stepped back, he caught her hand. Hannah. Just her name. But the way he said it, low, rough, aching, made her breath catch. She looked down at him, at this hard, lonely man who'd saved her for no reason except that he couldn't stand to see another person broken. And something inside her cracked open. Don't, she whispered. Please, don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something worth wanting. His grip tightened. You think you're not? I know I'm not. The words came out bitter. I've had a lifetime of people telling me so. Elias stood slowly, still holding her hand. He was so close now she could see the silver in his stubble, the pain in his winter sky eyes. Then they were blind, he said. And before she could answer, before she could pull away, or think, or breathe, he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry, and tasted like whiskey and want. His hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheeks as his mouth moved against hers with a need that matched her own. Hannah gasped, and he deepened the kiss, backing her against the table. She gripped his shoulders, solid, scarred, real, and kissed him back with everything she'd kept locked away for 28 years. His hands slid down her sides, tracing the curves she'd been taught to hide. But he wasn't hiding. He was worshiping. God, he breathed against her mouth. Hannah. She pulled at his shirt, needing skin, needing proof that this was real. He helped her, shrugging out of the fabric, and then his hands were on the laces of her dress, loosening them with shaking fingers. The dress slipped from her shoulders. Elias pulled back just enough to look at her, really look, and the hunger in his eyes made her feel powerful, desired, seen. You're beautiful, he said hoarsely. Christ, you're... Then his gaze caught on something past her shoulder, and his entire body went rigid. The silver locket had fallen from his pocket onto the table. It lay open, revealing two faces, a woman with kind eyes and a little girl with dark braids. Elias's hands dropped from Hannah's waist like she'd burned him. "No," he said, voice cracking. "No, I can't." He stumbled back, grabbing his shirt, his whole body shaking. Hannah stood there, half undressed and exposed, watching him fall apart. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Hannah, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have..." "It's fine," she said quickly, pulling her dress back up with numb fingers. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine, because she'd let herself hope, just for a moment, that someone could want her, could choose her. And now she knew the truth. She was just a replacement for a dead woman. Elias left the house and didn't come back until dawn. Hannah lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, trying not to cry, trying not to feel the ghost of his hands on her skin. When he finally came in, red-eyed and exhausted, she was already dressed and working on the ledgers. She didn't look up. "Hannah." "It's fine, Mr. Vance." "It's not fine." He sat down across from her, and when she tried to turn away, he caught her hand. "Look at me, please." She did, reluctantly. "I wasn't thinking of her when I kissed you," he said quietly. "I was thinking of you. Only you. But then I saw that locket, and I..." He stopped, jaw working. "I've spent 5 years punishing myself for not being there when they died, for being too late, and I don't know how to stop." Hannah's anger drained away. "How'd they die?" "Mine collapse. Raiders hit it, killed everyone inside for the silver." His voice broke, including my wife and daughter. "By the time I got there..." He didn't finish. She squeezed his hand. "You can't save everyone, Elias." "No," he said, "but I can save you, if you'll let me. I don't need saving." "I know." He smiled faintly. "That's why I want to try." They didn't speak of that night again. But something had shifted. They worked side by side, her managing the accounts, him handling the ranch. And slowly, carefully, they rebuilt the trust they'd almost broken. Then, Marcus Tate came. It was a hot afternoon when the riders appeared. 5 men on good horses, led by a silver-haired man in an expensive coat. Tate, the merchant who'd organized Hannah's auction. Elias met them in the yard, rifle in hand. "Get off my land." Tate smiled, cold as snake eyes. "Now that's not very hospitable, Vance. I came to make you an offer." "Not interested." "You haven't heard it yet." Tate's gaze slid past Elias to where Hannah stood in the doorway. "I want the woman back. I'll pay double what you spent." Hannah's blood ran cold. "She's not for sale," Elias said flatly. "Everything's for sale in Dusty Hollow." Tate's smile widened. "Including this land. See, I know there's silver under these hills, and I know you can't afford to keep it much longer. So here's my offer. Give me the woman and sign over your mineral rights, and I'll let you walk away alive." Elias didn't move. "Get off my land." Tate's expression darkened. "Have it your way." He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. But Hannah knew. They both knew. It wasn't over. The attack came 3 nights later. Hannah woke to the smell of smoke. She stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, and saw orange light flickering through the windows. The barn was on fire. "Elias!" she screamed. He was already up, grabbing his rifle and boots. "Stay inside." "Like hell." She snatched the shotgun from above the door and followed him out. The yard was chaos, flames roaring, cattle panicking, shadows moving in the smoke. Tate's men. At least 4 of them. Maybe more. A bullet whined past Hannah's ear. She dropped, rolled, came up firing. The shotgun kicked hard enough to bruise, but she saw one of the shadows fall. Elias was ahead of her, rifle cracking with methodical precision. One shot, one body. Another shot, another body. Then Jed Crowley, Tate's enforcer, a brute with a scarred face, came out of the smoke with a Bowie knife. He went straight for Elias. The two men grappled, Crowley's knife flashing. Elias blocked, twisted, drove his knee into Crowley's gut. But the man was bigger, stronger, fueled by rage and greed. The knife slashed across Elias's shoulder. Blood sprayed, dark in the firelight. "No!" Hannah screamed. She didn't think, just moved. The shotgun was empty, so she grabbed the Winchester from where Elias had dropped it, aimed, breathed, and pulled the trigger. Crowley jerked, a red flower blooming on his chest. He looked at Hannah with wide, disbelieving eyes. Then he fell. The silence after was worse than the violence. Hannah stood there, rifle still smoking, staring at the body she'd made. Her hands were shaking so hard the gun clattered to the ground. Elias was on his knees, blood soaking his shirt. "Hannah, look at me." She couldn't. "Hannah." He crawled to her, pulled her down, wrapped his good arm around her while she shattered. "You saved my life," he whispered. "You hear me? You saved me." "I killed him." "Yes, you did." He tilted her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "And I'm alive because of it. That's what matters." But it didn't feel like it mattered. It felt like something inside her had broken, something she'd never get back. By the time the fire burned itself out, 2 more of Tate's men were dead, and the rest had fled. Elias's wound was deep, but not fatal. Hannah stitched it closed with shaking hands while he gritted his teeth and didn't make a sound. "We need to end this," she said when she was done. "I know. Tate won't stop. Not until one of us is dead." Elias met her eyes. "So we stop him first." Hannah had been keeping more than just account books. For weeks, she'd been documenting everything. The inflated prices Tate charged, the workers he paid in scrip instead of real money, the ore he smuggled out without paying taxes. She had dates, names, numbers, enough to bury him. The problem was the sheriff. Everyone knew he was in Tate's pocket. But there was someone else, a journalist from Santa Fe who'd been writing about corruption in the mining towns. Hannah had seen his name in an old newspaper, Thomas Whitaker, Territorial Observer. If she could get the evidence to him. "It's too dangerous," Elias said when she told him the plan. "Everything's dangerous." She tied off the last bandage. "But this might actually work. Tate will be watching the roads." "Then I won't take the roads." She left at dawn with the documents hidden in her saddlebags, riding the old mule, because it was less conspicuous than Elias's horses. It took her 6 hours to reach Santa Fe, cutting through arroyos and back trails. Every shadow made her flinch. Every sound made her reach for the revolver Elias had insisted she carry. But she made it. Whitaker was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes. He listened to her story, read through her documents, and nodded slowly. "This is good," he said. "This is very good. If even half of this is true." "It's all true." "Then Marcus Tate is finished." He looked at her seriously. "But you know what this means, don't you? When this gets out, you'll have to testify. Face him in court." Hannah's stomach twisted, but she thought of Elias bleeding in the dirt, of Crowley's body, of all the people Tate had crushed over the years. "I'll do it," she said. Tate didn't wait for the article to publish. He came with 8 men this time, in broad daylight, riding straight up to the ranch like he owned it. Elias met them in the yard, rifle across his chest, arm still bandaged but steady. "End of the line, Vance," Tate called. "Federal marshals are coming for me in 3 days. But you and that whore of yours, You'll be dead before they arrive." "She's not a whore," Elias said quietly, "and you're not getting past me." Tate laughed. 8 against 1. I like those odds. 7, Hannah said, stepping out of the house with the Winchester. "And I've already killed one of yours." The men shifted nervously. They'd heard what happened to Crowley. Tate's face darkened. "Fine. We'll do this the hard way." He went for his gun. What followed was brutal and brief. Elias shot first, dropped the man to Tate's left before he could clear leather. Hannah fired half a second later, punching a hole through another man's shoulder. The yard erupted in gunfire. Elias moved like water, rolling behind the water trough, firing methodically. Hannah took cover behind a wagon wheel, hands steady now, breath calm. She'd killed once. She could do it again if it meant survival. 3 men went down in the first 30 seconds. 2 more fled. That left Tate and one last gunman, a kid, barely 20, with a revolver that shook in his hand. "Go," Elias told him, "while you still can." The kid looked at Tate, then at Elias. Then he ran. And Tate, seeing his army desert him, made a desperate play. He lunged for Hannah. She fired, but her rifle clicked empty. Tate grabbed her, spun her around, pressed his own gun to her temple. "Drop it, Vance," he screamed. "Drop it or she dies." Elias froze, rifle still raised. His eyes met Hannah's across the blood-soaked yard. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't you dare." "Shut up." Tate jammed the gun harder against her skull. "I'll kill her. I swear to God, I'll—" Hannah drove her elbow into his ribs, twisted, and sank Elias's skinning knife, which she'd tucked in her boot that morning, deep into Tate's belly. He made a sound like a punctured bellows. The gun fell from his hand. Hannah stepped back, shaking, and watched him collapse into the dust. "You bitch," Tate gasped, blood bubbling between his lips. "You bitch." Elias walked over and kicked the gun away. Then he knelt beside Hannah, who was still staring at her bloody hands. "It's over," he said gently. "It's done." But she wasn't sure it would ever be done. Not really. The federal marshals arrived 2 days later. Just as Whitaker's article hit the papers, they found Tate barely alive, 4 dead men in the yard, and 2 people who'd fought like hell to stay free. There was an investigation, questions, depositions, but in the end, the marshals ruled it self-defense. Tate was arrested, survived long enough to stand trial, and get sentenced to 20 years for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to murder. Dusty Hollow changed after that. Slowly. Not everyone approved of what Hannah had done. Some still called her Tate's whore, still sneered when she came to town. But she didn't care anymore. 2 months after the gunfight, on a cool October evening, Hannah stood on the ridge overlooking the ranch. The Sandia Mountains glowed red in the sunset, and the air smelled of sage and coming rain. She heard boots on the stone behind her. Elias stood there, the silver locket in his hand. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he closed it carefully and tucked it in his pocket, not throwing it away, but putting it to rest. "They'd want me to live," he said quietly. "Not just survive. Live." Hannah nodded. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I made you a deed," he said. "Half the ranch is yours, legal and recorded. You're my partner, equal." Her throat tightened. "Elias, you saved my life, Hannah. Twice. Maybe more times than I can count." He touched her face gently. "And I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't know if we'll work. But I know I don't want to face it without you." Hannah closed her eyes, felt the weight of the past 2 months, the blood, the fear, the impossible hope, settle into something like peace. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, I don't know how to be loved. Neither do I, he admitted. But maybe we can figure it out together. She opened her eyes and looked at him. This hard, broken, honorable man who'd saved her not because she needed saving, but because he'd needed someone to save. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. She kissed him softly, there on the ridge, as the sun bled out over New Mexico. It wasn't a happy ending. It was messier than that, more real. But it was theirs. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain. Somewhere below, cattle lowed. The ranch waited, patient and enduring, and two people who'd learned to survive started learning, slowly, how to live. If this story found you in the place you needed it most, leave a like. Share it with someone who understands the weight of second chances. Subscribe for more tales from the Old West, where honor, desire, and redemption collide in the dust and firelight. And tell me in the comments, where are you hearing this from? What corner of the world needs these stories tonight? There are more tales waiting in the shadows. Stay a while.